everybody. It is Steve with Real Progressives. Tonight, I want to talk about the most important thing to me is destroying neoliberalism. But I want to look at the shootings that happened in Virginia, and I want to talk about desperation, and I want to look at a lot of different things right now that I don't think people are really taking into account. It's an important subject because it's deeper, unfortunately, than the average conversation that regular voters have, that regular citizens have. And because it's deeper, that means that it's probably not going to be paid attention to as much by people. It'll probably be glossed over. It'll probably be missed. The most important thing we can talk about is the lack of hope people have in America and, quite frankly, around the world. In the United States, there is so much despair. There's so much poverty. There is so much broken dreams and lack of opportunity. There are so many things right now that we try to, smear some happiness and smear some fake joy around in an attempt to try to hide the desperation we feel, just so we can put one foot in front of the other and be able to get through a given day. Now, some people probably fake it better than others, and other people, maybe they have it really good. Maybe they got life by the short hairs and everything is just hunky-dory. But there's a large amount of people out there right now that are really struggling. And they're searching for answers. They want to know why life sucks so bad. They want to know why they can't find peace and a decent life and not have to worry about where they're going to get their next meal, and not have to worry about how they're going to pay their electric bill, not worry about whether they're going to have a home to live in. The amount of stress that we as human beings feel as a result of what I oftentimes refer to as neoliberal austerity. In other words, cutting back spending, reducing spending on the people, making it more of a dog-eat-dog world, making it just a little bit harder to get by, and pushing us out there to market-based solutions where they can say, hey, you don't have the money, you don't get the service. I think people have to do whatever they have to do to get up in the morning and go to work, or get up in the morning and survive. And they don't think about this stuff because it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of blurry. You've been lied to for an awful long time. You've been made to feel like the United States is so broke that it couldn't possibly take care of its weakest, that it couldn't possibly take care of the average person, that it has to choose between veterans and immigrants, that it has to choose between white people and brown people and this people and that people. All of these lies have been left there to divide us and to keep us fighting each other and hating each other. And it leads to despair. It leads to hopelessness. There's an old saying, the most dangerous man in the world is a guy who's got nothing left to lose. And when you push people to the brink and you take away everything that matters to them, whether it be friends, family, house, job, children, eventually people, they either implode or they explode. And some of these lies we tell ourselves. We perpetuate the lies that keep us in this no-win situation. Now, I asked a question earlier today on a social media platform. Where does money come from? Where do you think the government got all that money to give the military $750 billion of new money while simultaneously cutting taxes? Where do you think all that money came from? Now, mind you, I just told you they cut taxes. So where do you think it came from? These questions should be near and present to everybody. They should be the thing that you ask all the time. Why is it that when we talk about helping regular people, the first thing that comes out of people's mouths is, we're too broke. We don't have money. How in the world could we afford? How are you going to pay for Medicare for all? How are you going to pay for health care? And we do it to ourselves. I mean, think about how many times you've been talking to a friend, sitting there at a political rally, sitting there at a coffee shop, at your job, and talking to somebody, and they say, they're running up the national debt. They're running up the deficit. How many times have you felt like you were ultimately never going to see anything good happen? Because you just felt like either A, Congress is completely bought off, or B, the government is so ineffective that every time we rely on it, it screws us up, so we got to cut the government. How many times have you looked around and thought, look at my neighbor, they're getting over on food stamps, they're milking the system, they're working the system, they're getting over. Sitting there in Walmart looking over your friend's shoulder, looking over the people in front of your shoulder and wondering why they got crab meat when you know their food stamps don't allow for crab meat. How many times have you looked down at less fortunate people and said, you should have made better choices? How many times have you thought, they're always blowing their money on the wrong things, and judged them? They've baked into society this judgment thing, this idea that the little people are definitely the cause of all the problems. The poor people are the cause of the problems. They keep wanting more things. They keep demanding more things. They keep pushing their radical poor people agenda. Every time I see these things, I say to myself, my goodness, how could the least capable, the least able to defend themselves, be the ones that are causing all the problems? It defies any logic at all. And yet, we see these people, we look down on them, we avoid eye contact with them, like they've done something wrong, like they're the pariah, and you see people in church and other places. I don't want to just beat up on the church because they're easy target, but look at so-and-so, look at so-and-so, I hear they're doing this. Gossip, gossip, gossip. We have baked in this punitive society that covers up the truth about why people are struggling. It puts all the onus on the poor, punching down. And you never ask why we have the money for the government to spend $750 billion on the military while simultaneously cutting taxes. You have thought for your entire life that when you pay a federal tax, it's going to pay for things. You've seen those pie charts that talk about all the different things your taxes go to. Well, this quadrant over here pays for welfare. This quadrant over here pays for the military-industrial complex. This quadrant over here pays for whatever. And look at those entitlements. Oh, my God. Maybe if you cut some of them entitlements, I could get some of my money back and you wouldn't take so much taxes from me. And, of course, you had Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher telling you nonstop there's no such thing as public money. There's only taxpayer dollars. And you've heard everyone from Bernie Sanders to Barack Obama to George Bush to Reagan, you name it, talking about the taxpayer dollar as if it's being spent on these things. So naturally, you must believe that in order to pay for things, in order to do these things, in order to take care of the people, somehow or another we got to get more tax dollars to do it. The irony of all this is that the United States government creates dollars every time it spends. Every single time. It doesn't use the tax dollars. So where does that money come from? It comes from keystrokes when Congress authorizes that spending. But yet you hear Congress talking like it's so poor, like it can't afford to do anything. Right now, in the public space, you've got Bill Mitchell, Randall Wray, and Martin Watts, who have written a textbook called Macroeconomics. That textbook is a first of its kind textbook that lays out in detail how actual macroeconomics works. They didn't title it Modern Monetary Theory, they titled it Macroeconomics, because MMT is nothing but just macroeconomics. And it's the scientific view, not the ideological view. But in this book, they sold out the entire first run of that book. Why is that? Because people are desperate for answers to all the questions I was just talking about. They're wondering why we can't have nice things. They're wondering why we keep saying that we can't afford health care, why we can't afford education. And they've convinced you beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the only way to solve those problems is to raise taxes on the rich, or raise taxes on, or cut the military, or do something. They have convinced you beyond the shadow of a doubt that the only way to do anything new and good is to cut spending somewhere else, or to raise taxes. So this dynamic is one that is a perpetual losing dynamic. And we already know it. It's like playing tic-tac-toe with somebody. When you're a kid, playing tic-tac-toe is fun, because you still have it in your head. You just might win. But when you get older, you realize that tic-tac-toe is always going to be a hang unless somebody screws up. Unless somebody really screws up, does a boneheaded move. Tic-tac-toe, it's the same thing over and over again. Wash, rinse, repeat. And that's what it is every time we believe that the nation's broke, that we can't afford nice things, that we can't take care of our people, that we can't ensure that the public purpose is served, that our government has to be so weak that it's inept instead of so strong that it can deliver what we need. You know, the idea of big government, little government keeps getting thrown in there to obscure the facts. Fact is, the government is supposed to be we the people. Not some nebulous thing. Not some other thing. It's us. We've given that up. We've allowed corporations to buy off our politicians. And they keep the lies up, because it serves their donors. The more the federal government spends on the people, the less we are in need of going into debt. Private debt. Private debt that we can't dig out of, that creates even more hopelessness. And after a while, our income doesn't match up with our debt, and we become bankrupt. And there are people that are trying to turn the screws to make it even harder to go bankrupt. They made it so you can't discharge your student loans. They come and they garnish your wages. They go after the regular people like they've been doing something wrong, like they're bad. And that feeling of despair creates hopelessness. And that hopelessness creates a lot of problems. We see it in the gun culture. We see it in people doing other things, killing people, raping people. Horrible things to try to maintain some form of control in their lives, to have some power. You take the most gruesome, unforgivable sin of murder, and you realize that it was generated in large part from a lack of health care, a lack of hope, pain and suffering, induced largely by the neoliberal need to privatize and make us dig hard and dig deep and work harder and harder and longer and harder and more and have less. The family disintegrates. The home is lost. Despair follows. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see this. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that without good jobs, not just jobs, everybody needs money, because that's how we pay our taxes. Everybody needs money because that's how we eat. We live in a monetary economy. How hard it is to get our hands a hold of that dollar, or how easy it is to get a hold of that dollar, directly impacts our ability to survive. Unfortunately, we've made getting a dollar incredibly difficult for the average person. We've made it so that people are literally drowning in private debt. The people don't understand why. They don't get it. And so they charge out to their local party, Democrats, Republicans. There's a big shindig going on in California right now. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of talk about monetary sovereignty or the fact that the United States government creates its own dollar every time it spends. That it's not dependent on tax dollars to fund programs. And so they'll continue believing that the Democrats or the Republicans are the savior, depending upon where you're coming from. In reality, we the people, the 99, which includes both Republicans and Democrats and independents, you name it, all of us can lead lives full of promise, full of hope, full of joy, without scrounging to get our teeth fixed, without scrounging to get our heart medicine taken care of, without having to die because we can't afford chemotherapy, without cutting corners and not taking our kids to the doctor because we're afraid to take a day off from work for fear of getting laid off. And yet people still, even with all that, they're content believing the nation is broke. They're content believing that it takes tax dollars to pay for things, in spite of the fact that they see with their very eyes that we cut taxes and still raise the military spending up to $750 billion. Not one person asked, what about inflation? Not one person asked, you're devaluing my dollar, aren't you? Not one person said anything about the cost of bread back in 1913 or anything like that. They just accepted that the military was getting money. And they went on their merry way. Which wasn't so merry, because even the poor believe this, that the nation is broke. Democrats believe the nation is broken. That's why they've got to raise taxes. Do you know most of these Democrats that are going to be at Chatham, and not just at that, but that are running for president, believe that the nation is broke, has to tax to spend, and so forth? All of them are going to tell you about their tax plan and how they're going to pay for their programs. And all of them is going to be lying to you. Every one of them will be lying to you. Because they know that you believe that the nation is broke. And so they will play to the lowest common denominator. The lowest common denominator believes the nation's broke. They believe that somehow or another we can't afford a Green New Deal. They believe we can't afford a federal job guarantee. And they believe it, man. They believe it in their core. And they will fight you tooth and nail as if they are in the know when you explain to them, we can do nice things without raising taxes. Medicare for all really requires a tax cut because it's got a deflationary bias. Yet even Bernie is out there pushing, raising taxes on income and so forth to pay for Medicare for all. Well, it's simply not the case. It's not true. Bernie's economics team knows this, but Bernie's voters don't. And Bernie's trapped in having a great economic team, but having people that are stretched to the end, working long hours, dealing with children, dealing with everything else. They don't have the time, the energy, or the inclination to hear about how federal finance actually works. They just don't. And so he's trapped in saying, we're going to do a Wall Street speculation tax. We're going to raise income tax up 2%. We're going to make everyone pay their fair share. Some people can't stand it. It drives them crazy to hear it. Other people cheer him on and show a meme that shows how Bernie's going to pay for all his programs. Others say, well, if we just slashed the military by 50%, we can afford everything. We can afford everything whether we spend triple on the military. We create the currency, folks. There is no bank holding us hostage. And this deception, this horrible, horrible money famine deception is perpetuated by all of us. And as these people run for office, they keep parroting the lie because that's what you believe. And as long as you believe it, they got to get elected. And they're going to say what it takes for you to vote for them. And if you're terrified of China buying up the United States, you're going to be very afraid of the national debt. And so those candidates that come around running around talking about the national debt are going to capture your attention. And if you're one of those people that hasn't had the time to do the homework, and you're many, you are the majority, the vast majority, you will believe that a UBI, a universal, unconditional, basic income, is a good thing. because of all the pain and suffering, you're going to assume that just handing money out to everyone is a really good thing. But it is not. Why is that? Well, there's a couple reasons. Many reasons. But I'm just going to list a few of them off real quickly. Number one, universal basic income has no price anchor. Now, why does that matter? If I'm giving you cash, cash only has its own purpose as long as it can buy things available in it. But when you just pump money out there without production, the price anchor aspect of this goes out the window. Now all of a sudden prices rise. It's got a naturally inflationary bias. There's nothing to prevent prices from skyrocketing. And now you've got $1,000. $1,000 doesn't do you very good. It doesn't do you any good if prices have gone up in such a way that you can't afford the services you need. That's number one. Number two, employers will subsidize bad wages with a UBI. That's what employers do. That's what the market does. That's the world we live in. Number three, and this is the big one, the right wing has long championed a UBI. Various ways of saying it: negative income tax, helicopter money. Milton Friedman championed a UBI. Milton Friedman, of the right-wing, monetarist, neoliberal godfather, championed a UBI. Because he said, the only thing wrong with capitalism is we need more capitalism. Why is that a big deal? Well, because what they want is they want to say all those government services are a waste. The government is inefficient. It doesn't do a good job. They want to gut everything from the New Deal. Here's your $1,000. Now go take care of all those services. Well, I assure you, the thing about giving you services versus cash, the services, whether the price goes up or down, you're guaranteed the service. If you're given cash and there's no price anchor, you're not guaranteed anything at all. The average person will suffer. There is nothing to peg that at all. The other thing is you're devaluing labor. This is a real, honest-to-goodness, from a socialist perspective and from a fairness in the right-wing perspective. It does nothing to benefit society because people need to eat. People need shelter. People need a host of things. And the original reason for money was so that the government could provision itself. So the government, all governments, create a unit of account so that they can provision themselves. And in order for you to accept their money, they impose a tax payable only in that account, that unit of account. So now you have to pay a tax in that government's unit of account. And it's to serve the government's need to drive the economy. Those tax dollars are not redistributed. They don't pay for programs. They're there to drive the currency and to stave off inflation, to curb purchasing power, to maybe change behaviors that we don't like, to maybe try to wreck some wealth inequality, whatever. But none of it is to actually pay for a program. Not 1 ounce of nothing. And that includes FICA, Social Security. A case in point for all this privatization. Social Security, we've been sold this forever, is going broke. Everybody believes, well, I've paid into it. Well, let's talk about Social Security for a minute, because it is a perfect case study for all that we've just talked about. By trying to make it out that Social Security is broke and that government is inefficient and that we need to privatize and take your Social Security to Wall Street, where you can earn money. Man, the riches are never ending. What they've done is once again tried to render government weak and powerless. It's not. It's the creator of the dollar, so naturally it's not that. It also creates a new market for the private sector, because now all of a sudden the private sector is controlling your retirement more than they were before. And it also creates another class of losers, people that lose in life, people that played the market and lost their entire life savings. The ebbs and flows of the economy. If you don't understand federal finance, my goodness, we're going to have another dot-com bubble burst. We're going to have another mortgage meltdown. We're going to have another CDO and all the different shorts kick our butt. Next up, student debt loan. Next up, stock buyback trouble. Ultimately, the U.S. dollar, speaking purely from a U.S.-centric standpoint, is merely a tax credit. We can never run out of dollars because we create them with keystrokes every time we spend. So all this pain and suffering, going back to the beginning of this talk, all this pain and suffering is largely based on a lie. A lie that we can't afford nice things. A lie that tax dollars are what funds these things. A lie that keeps us hating our neighbor. And it's a lie rooted in racist bigotry. What do you think a taxpayer looks like? I want you to think about this long and hard. A taxpayer is supposed to be the good guy. And forever and a day, the good guy, they've tried to paint out to be the white guy. The white guy that always does right, goes to church, takes care of their kids, has the white picket fence, works hard. They don't do bad things. They work hard and they do the right thing. They make good choices. This is intentional. This imagery is not accidental. It's a way, once again, to make people who have been marginalized look like they are the cause of their own misfortune. And we feel like we've won by the way the system's inequality is baked in. Folks, not only does taxpayer dollars not actually exist in the sense of once those taxes are received, they're deleted and purged because they've done their job. The government spent it into existence. The government taxed it out of existence. It didn't need your dollars. It could have kept spending. But it's got to make the currency something you need. So it taxes in it. That's what makes our dollar hold its value. That's what makes people have to have U.S. dollars, no matter how much Bitcoin they want to have. No matter how much confidence someone else loses in the dollar. If you've got to pay your taxes in the U.S. dollar, you can be as unconfident in the U.S. dollar as you want to be. But you don't pay your taxes, you got trouble. So, as these events occur, like the shooting in Virginia, And we see other people running around buying toys, this, that, and the other, and you see other people getting jealous and looking over there as they can't afford their home. And you start seeing the real strain from wealth inequality and income inequality, and you see the real bias in the system. And you start seeing more and more people kill themselves, kill others, divorces, you name it. You need to know it's all been done in the name of a lie. Imagine, as we watch climate change rip through, man-made climate change, and we try and say, what's the fix? And somebody comes back and says, we'll tax our way to a Green New Deal. Well, they've missed the plot right off the jump. It's important to know that we can afford a Green New Deal. A brand new report just came out of Levy Institute. Randall Wray, one of the key writers on it, broke down how to pay for a Green New Deal. Details, deep details, how to do it. It's not rocket science. The formulas might be, and all the expected trade-offs and this, that, and the other might. But the reality, we can afford to pay for the public purpose. We can afford to survive. And ultimately, by paying into a Green New Deal, providing a job guarantee, taking the pain and suffering out of the process, giving people health care, ending student debt, providing free college so people can be all they want to be, and they can learn all they want to learn, and they can develop skills that they want to develop. Providing people that path is a surefire way to providing hope. And hope is what's going to help us dream a better dream, have a better life for everyone. So that when we go into poor and disadvantaged communities, we're not watching gentrification rip them apart. We know better. We can fix those areas up. When we hear people talking about bad drinking water, we don't have to sit there and accept that. We can fix the pipes. When we see Puerto Rico get decimated by a hurricane, we don't need to send profiteers down there as vultures. When Detroit goes bankrupt, we don't need to send in a venture capitalist to go ahead and poach all their artwork. No. We can afford, the federal government can afford to fix all of these problems. And so many people, the average American, will sit there like Archie Bunker in their easy chair, flipping through reality TV, watching clickbait, whatever, and never, ever, ever take the moment to think how the heck the government came up with $750 billion while simultaneously cutting taxes to pay for the military. It won't even cross their mind. And when they vote, they'll still vote for the person that's going to reduce the deficit. They'll still vote for the person that's going to reduce the national debt, which is not debt at all. How does a nation that creates its own money have to worry about debt in the sense of securities or treasuries? I want to talk about this really quickly, because this is a big one that comes up, especially at election time. Countries like China do a lot of business with the United States. And when they sell goods and services into the United States, they get U.S. dollars. Well, China, although some of their shopping areas accept U.S. dollars, China uses the yuan. They don't use the US dollar. The yuan is the Chinese currency. It's their unit of account. So they have to sit there and think to themselves, do they want to hold dollars? Do they want to keep those dollars there to facilitate more transactions? Or do they want to try and earn some interest on those dollars? Well, the United States government has given the Federal Reserve its charter. And the Fed sets bank rates. It sets the interbanking rate for purchasing dollars. And the percentage, the interest rate on loans. Not for regular people, because the banks pass on whatever additional overhead they want to when they issue a loan to a creditworthy or uncreditworthy person. But the interbanking transactions have a percent on them. And it ties to the treasuries, it ties to the bonds, and what happens is they have a small nominal interest rate to defend a positive interest rate that the Fed sets. And so that's why they sell bonds. This is a way of playing the game to keep interest rates at a certain level. Now, if we set interest rates to forever zero, they wouldn't have to sell treasuries anymore. They wouldn't need to sell bonds. Heck, they still don't really need to. But as long as there's a positive interest rate paying out, they have to sell bonds in order to offset that. Is it debt in terms of, oh my God, taxpayers have to pay for it? No. When the U.S. government, when the Treasury, when the Fed, when they set these treasuries out there, they sell them in the open market. And when they sell these things, they've already budgeted that new money creation for the interest. They've already budgeted all this. They've already created it. Those people, they put their money in there. They already buy these things. You can't buy them in some other currency. You buy them in US dollars. So there's no way of going insolvent on debt denominated in our own currency. We can't go broke on debt in US dollars because we create US dollars. So China makes a decision that they want to have more US dollar holdings. Big deal. What if they want to get rid of US dollar holdings? It's still not a big deal. If the United States suddenly is no longer the world reserve currency or whatever, then we're going to do a lot more producing of our own goods and services. Who cares? Now, goods and services are a real cost because the real resources, the metal, the plastic, the circuit boards, the whatever, precious metals, the hours, the actual real resources we spend to create those things, that is a real cost. That piece of paper, that digit, it's not. So being a net importer isn't such a bad deal. We're trading digits and we're trading dollars for their goods and services, which frees us up to fix our infrastructure. It frees us up to hire more teachers, to give them raises. Frees us up to give out free college and expand the university system and to make our healthcare work. But that debt, that U.S. debt and treasuries, that $21 trillion that scares everyone to death, it's the sum total of every untaxed dollar in existence. And here's the thing. If the federal government doesn't spend the money to keep the economy going, then that means that we, to keep the economy going, go into private debt. We can neither make our own currency ourselves to pay it, nor can we counterfeit it or whatever. We go to jail. We are stuck, and we become wage slaves. And that breeds more hopelessness. So the fear of the national debt has done a real number on the average American person, the average voter. Now you tell somebody this stuff and they think you're crazy, but the truth is the truth. I'll provide plenty of sources if you want. This isn't rocket scientist stuff. This is simply a fact. This is stuff that we don't think about because we've been lied to. And that lie creates hopelessness. But the truth, macroeconomic truth, modern monetary theory, it creates hope. And it's that hope that is going to allow us to stave off the horrible effects of climate change. And it will allow us to give kids a real start by ending student debt and making college free. And it will make a real dent in the lives of so many by providing a guaranteed job, a public option, a transition job for those who have been cut out and left out of the economy, or people that just simply want to serve their local community. Real hope, real change, without blood, without violence. And I'm not talking about which political party is the right party. I'm telling you, this is how it is. If you're a Republican, there's no reason to cut spending, my friends. There's no need to look down your nose at the poor. If you're a Democrat, stop chasing deficits. Stop chasing tax dollars. Stop trying to raise FICA taxes to save Social Security. Social Security is fine. We could fund it forever. Even Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke and others say the United States can do it. And we can. I hope as we go into this election season and you listen to these candidates, you start thinking about who's got the big vision, who's trying to really do big things. I hope you realize that we really can do big things. We can transform this world, and we can stop pain and suffering. And I'm not talking some utopian, dreamer land here. I'm telling you straight up, we can afford to do nice things. And it's time to pull back the curtain and stop the lie from hurting us any longer. And start pushing back and saying, no, we know the truth now. You can't keep saying that any longer. Spend on the people now. I hope you guys got something out of tonight. Please look up modern monetary theory, Stephanie Kelton. And listen, if you want to learn about MMT, don't go to people that hate MMT. They don't know anything about MMT. Go to the MMT academics. Look at their work. Read their work. Stephanie Kelton, Warren Mosler, Randall Wray, Bill Mitchell, Ellis Winningham, Stephen Hale, Fidel Kaboub, Pavlina Cherneva, the Modern Money Network, Bob Hockett, and many others. Take the time to do the homework and help somebody else take the mask off and the blockers and the blinds so that they can see too. This is very, 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 very important, my friends. Please, as we go further, remember, we aren't broke, and we truly can do wonderful things. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. Have a good night, everybody.